Right, now I've got to consider putting the sections together of the clock, and I'm going to do a dry run first to make sure that the pillars are in the right place and I can organise the bases to match up. The top section is sitting on the top, which I'm going to now move for the moment. So that's the top section there, with the pillars and with the rods coming down into the base of the clock, which I will then have to fill with plaster of Paris. I'm going to do it all with plaster of Paris because that's how it was originally done, and it seems to work very well. I've roughed up the places where we're going to put the plaster, or I'm going to put the plaster later, those, so that although I covered them with Mel Black and polish, they are now, in a way, they'll be adhesive. So I'm going to assemble these parts. That's the left, that's that, that's the motif, goes in there, that goes there, and this goes in there. These are so much better than they were before. They're not perfect, but then I can't get them perfect. I haven't got the machinery. That goes in there. Right, now what I've got to do is to make sure that I line bases up so that they tally up with where they were before. This one moves and it should be just on the joint of that line there. So that's going to be there, and this matches that too. And I've got to make sure that the collar, this section there, which I will then fix in place when I'm satisfied, and leave the cups for the plaster of Paris to go into, so that when I drop the whole of the top section on, I can fill those up with fresh plaster of Paris, fill up the bases of these with plaster of Paris, and that they will really stick and hold. But I've got to fill in that bit. So I've got to line this up properly. That's got to come up with that one, and then I think those will all be all right. That looks good. That's about right for the motif. That's right. So now, and this one on the right hand side, not quite right. That's got to be just over like that, and then that's got to be lined up there. I've just got to make sure that these holes here are right. I think that's it then. That's there. Now, let's drop the top section on if I can without disturbing the bottom. Right, so let's see how that's gone. The main thing is to get these bottom blocks in the right place, so that when I fill them with plaster of Paris and leave a cavity for these to drop in, I fill the cavity and drop this in, and I don't want anything to go wrong at that point. So we've gone to phase one. Right now I'll take that carefully to pieces. When I say to pieces, to lift the top up as best I can. I don't think I'll move the white centre bases that are the crucial ones as far as the marking now is concerned. I've progressed a bit and I hope it's going to work. We'll soon find out. I've put the Plaster of Paris on this side, as you can see here. This all should come off quite easily. It did before, and I hope it will do again. And I've put in place just this one on this side. I haven't done it terribly well, but I think it'll hold and it will be all right. It's not as neat as the way that they did it in the factory, which really was much cleaner, and they managed to get everything really tight up against the parts that they were sticking. So I hope I can get it to look all right at the end. There are little gaps there which I'd hoped that wouldn't exist. Anyway, I've got to do this side yet with the cap, and then I've got to fill those up afterwards with plaster to take the decorative mouldings which will go around. So I'll let you know how it goes. We'll see the next stage. Well, now I have started doing the plaster work on this with Plaster of Paris, and I found that I made quite a grave mistake. I applied too much plaster, and as a consequence the pillars which are now sitting on dry fix, there's going to be a gap at the back here of 1 millimetre or so, or maybe more, when I've settled this in. Funnily enough, it's only at the back, it's not at the front. I can't put the knife in the front there, so in a way that's good. That is a blessing. What I've got to do now is, I think what I will do once I've settled this in, is pour Plaster of Paris in there and put tape around it so that it won't escape, and that will, I think, act as the solution. It's only a very narrow gap, but it's just not right. And I'll show you what I have done. What I've got to do now is to pour Plaster of Paris into this section here, with that there and this on top, so that I fill that with Plaster of Paris in the right position and secure this with a thin layer of plaster on there, and it's got to be thin. I put too much Plaster of Paris when adhering this. You can see on this side the plaster is coming out here. Right, as I was saying, I'm going to pour in the Plaster of Paris in here, put that back on top with a thin skim of plaster, put these in there to retain the holes for these sections to drop in to the holes. And when I've done that, then I will put this on the top, and with the gap that's left that needs to be filled at the back, which you can see here, it's only very small, but with that I will be able to pour in Plaster of Paris after this is set in place, and that will then stick the top to the bottom. In fact, it would almost be impossible for me to do it if I couldn't do it this way, because I've learnt that the skim of plaster that you need is so fine that it's really barely there. As you can see on this would just have a skim of plaster on it, very fine, and that would then be enough to make it stick. But by the time I've put this in place and skimmed a fine layer of plaster on the top here, there, for this to be able to adhere to it, frankly I think that it would be, this would have already started setting, so it wouldn't be much use. Anyway, that's what I've got to do now, and we'll see how it goes. It is quite exciting, and I can pour the plaster in there, put the little grommets in, then put a little bit more plaster in there and in the bases of this, and then assemble it. When I've done that, then I will tilt it out, pour the plaster in that section, and I hope by then I will have it all together in one solid piece. So I'll come back and see how it goes. I think I'll start with the other side to get this top on. Sort of I put a very little on this, less than I put on it before. Right, now I'm going to pour this in here. This is the easy side. Guess I could get the knife in there. Squidge it down, but I don't know about the other side. I've got to work quite quickly with this. This is not so easy, simply because that's enough. You see it coming out at the bottom down here, I hope. So I assume that's filled up. How's this one? Now I've held that in with an elastic band around, very primitive. It's gone right round and it's coming up inside that. So I can put these in here now. I can leave that now to harden. I hope these sections here will just flake off. Clean them off afterwards. So that'll take half an hour or so, and maybe an hour, and then I'll come back and see how it goes. Well, it's now about an hour and a half, 2 hours later, so I'm going to see how this has worked out. That's come out, so is that one, and so is that one. I don't think this is, it's solid, but it's not that hard. These have come out quite well too. That's good. This is the messy one that I had to pour it down. So let's see if this is. Well, that's paid off. Yep. Into the waste paper basket. Now, as you can see, I've got nice, neat holes there. I hope you can see that, to take the pillars. Now I can see how that's going to go. See what this has got to say now. Well, that's paid off quite well actually. Let's see if you can see that. Yes. Right, now I'm on for the acid test. I'm going to put the columns back in, the top back on, and I'm using Plaster of Paris. I'm mixing it in cold water, and I'm not mixing it, I'm sprinkling it. I'll show you now, which has been advised on the internet. You mix it with cold water and you sprinkle it in, and you get it down to what you want. So I'll carry on doing that now. I polished this so that I've got far too much. We've seen from our earlier work that it doesn't really matter too much if you get it onto the slate, because you can just pops off because of the polish that's on it, which is right. Let's get it onto these. That's it. Now press that down. God, dear, not as easy as it looks. God, I wouldn't believe it. Now you can see the gap here. It's really quite substantial, and I don't think there's much of a gap on the front all the way through, but not too watery to just flow out. I think that'll be all right. I hope. I put masking tape around it in the hope that I'll be able to arrest it. From leaking out. I think I've got enough there. I hope. Trying to force it in, but now I'm going to put the top sections on. They have to be stuck down. Plaster of Paris again. I'm a little bit of a loss as to what I should do, since I haven't been able to get any instructions about repairing clocks, and I don't know if you put the plaster on the clock or plaster on the slate, but I've decided to put it on the clock on this section, and then put the slate on top afterwards. stirring this gently. I think it needs a bit more. It's floating on the top now, so it's pretty well saturated. Right. Get the air out. Not that that matters too much, as long as there's no lumps. Right, I think that's about it. Now, I think I've got the two sections I'm going to put on. I'm going to, whether it's right or wrong, I don't know. I'm just going to spray them. So they'll slide in. I'm going to damp that just so it doesn't. Now I'm going to have a go at this. The fault I made before was putting too much plaster on. I don't want to do that this time. Already. Be level at the back. Up to the top. Right. That doesn't look too bad. Right, so that's the join there. I'll blacken that. When these seem to be pretty level. There's finger marks all over them, but and well, say a little prayer.